everyone, welcome back. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us again for today's Couple Matters Talk. My name is Michelle.
I am Sam.
I'm a licensed marriage family therapist.
And I am a spiritual and soul coach.
So today, what we want
so fancy, doesn't it? Like we got all the answers. We don't, man. But we do have a lot of experience in this, and people have asked us, just over the years, a bunch of questions, and we're working it out in our own lives, and so we have this opportunity to go ahead and share some of the things that we've gone through, things that some insights that we've gained over the years.
Yeah, we are on the same journey,
absolutely,
together with you. And so, what we want to talk about today is actually revisiting a question that was asked online, and we took it as, it must be talking about love languages. So you might have already seen the episode on love languages,
which is very important. Yeah.
But we now understand there was further clarification about that as conversations continued, and it was really this question of how did you learn to speak the same language? And I think that has more to do with the communication aspect of a coupleship. We might have addressed some of that in the episode on communication, but today we wanted to unpack that a little bit more. And initially we're thinking, well, I think it's not ever really going to be the same. Maybe it'll be similar. I think through just kind of the back and forth chats with our friend Heather, who first talked about this, it was she used this phrase, we've come to a place to learn how to speak a mutual language. And I like that phrasing because I think it's very descriptive of what couples learn to do. I think it really is a process. It's not, people will say, can you tell us what's the magic formula? What's the specific thing that needs to be done? And honestly, so much, if you've been listening in this week, is about process. It is messy. It's not perfect. We're not aiming for perfection here in relationship. We're going to stumble. And yet, every time there is a miscommunication or a conflict, I would even say it could be an opportunity to grow in understanding of your partner as well as your own self.
Yeah, and I think what Michelle said is just absolutely important, because this process we're talking about is not just the process of being in a relationship. It's not just about being a couple. It's really about the process that you're doing as an individual as well, because so much of the work in learning how to speak to one another, just processing a lot of the obstacles, all the things that may be standing in the way of really communicating well, or it has to do with all the stuff that's happening in the depths of your soul and in your mind, the self-talk, the thoughts. Being able to process that in healthy ways really adds to the communication that you are able to do with one another.
Yeah, and with the processing, there's definitely differences between external processors and internal processors. I actually think you are much more of an internal processor. I think we both are. I've learned over the years how to actually take what I'm thinking and to actually say it out loud. And I think sometimes part of learning the mutual language is us being able to speak out loud more of what we're thinking in our minds. Again, we don't have to say everything that we're thinking about, which I think for some of those who are external processors, it's like, that's really like what you're doing. You are hashing out as you go through something out loud, and the other person who might be very different in that might think, oh, that's the final answer, or that's the final thought, when it was actually still like mid-thought, just out loud.
And there's a lot more to go. When Michelle said you don't have to say everything, at least for me, what I've experienced is that I thought I have said everything, but just record yourself sometime and listen back to what you're trying to say. And this kind of happened for me when I was preaching. I recorded myself preaching, and I listened to myself, and I was like, what on earth was I trying to say? there were these huge gaps in my message. And I realized this is kind of the way that I sometimes talk to Michelle or to other people. In my mind, it makes perfectly sense what I am trying to say, but I realize oftentimes I leave out these huge gaps just because I understand what I'm saying, but I'm not articulating in a way that the other person is able to understand. So there are times where, okay, we might not have to say everything, but some of us actually need to say a little bit more.
Yes, totally. And I think the other thing that we had, you and I just kind of talking about, was the filter stuff.
Yeah. I mean, in our minds, as we are trying to communicate, we have a particular worldview or particular perspective of something. I mean, we value certain things and we filter things through those values. But we have to understand the other person, it's not that they don't value it. They might value it not as much as you value something. But in the meantime, we're trying to communicate how important this thing is. And they're not invalidating it, but because we think that it's so important, they should think that it's important too. Things like that really filter out a lot what we're trying to say, and the person just doesn't get it.
Yeah, and I think that's where some of the other things that we've talked about in terms of communication and conflict and just working on our own self-awareness comes in. And this is really where that question of intention, but I didn't mean it, or this is what I actually meant, versus the actual and how it was received by the person.
Yeah.
Those are moments where you can just stop and actually say, "Okay, can we talk about what happened? Because this is the way that I was perceiving it and the way that I received it." And if that's not ever clarified, you stay in a cycle of that, like, why can't the other person change? I'm telling them to do this and they're not doing it, and you just feel stuck. And so to actually stop for that moment, or not in that specific like actual moment literally, but to at some point really be able to say, okay, oftentimes when this happens, I'm taking it as however it might you're taking it, right? And to be able to communicate that and say, is that your intention? Because this is how I'm experiencing it.
I've at least for me, I found it so valuable when Michelle would ask those clarifying questions. And I'll be honest with you though, in the beginning, I struggled with it because no one's ever done that for me. So I actually took offense to it. Like I thinking to myself, how come you don't understand me? You should understand me. You're my wife. That's such a ridiculous thing to say, especially when I'm leaving these huge gaps. It was when I finally understood how much of a gift that was. That Michelle was doing to ask me those clarifying questions. It just made such a big difference. And so, I mean, those of you who struggle with being asked questions like that, that's more about you, the struggle to be asked a question, our fears and insecurities coming into play, those filters that we just talked about. But just give it a chance. It's very powerful, these clarifying questions, and then take the time to think it through. And then articulate it again and ask them the question, right? Did that make sense? All right, did you understand what I was trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, all of this is a process.
Really?
Again, there's no one way, and what works for us may not always work for somebody else and another couple, or for you who's listening. But we will say that there are these frameworks that are healthier than others. And I think part of really learning a couple language is to have that willingness to enter into literally each other's worlds. And in like learning a foreign language, if you didn't grow up in that language, you might not actually, you're not going to maybe be as fluent as you want to be, but it's a lifelong process to get fluent in the way that, your partner is. And so we want to leave that thought in your mind in that sense. And it's what both of you are willing to do. It always comes back to that.
Keep at it, because we are absolutely convinced that both of you really do want it, right? Just make sure you're able to communicate this to each other. I know you want this. I want this as well. So just keep at it. We bless you. We encourage you. We empower you. Go get it.
Thanks for listening.